All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to get us kicked off here. My name is Jennifer Riddle Curley. I am an architect at Perkins & Will, and I help lead our Midwest health practice. I've been working for 20 years. Most of those I've been focused on healthcare. Today, we are here to talk about one of the most meaningful experiences I've had professionally, and it's definitely a project that has left a mark on me, and I'd probably say all four of us. It involved extreme project delivery and multidisciplinary collaboration at the highest level. And we're just excited to share a little bit of our collective story with you today. To start, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the project. It's called the Sherman Alternate Care Facility in Elgin, Illinois. Okay, so let's start with the definition of an alternate care facility. Per the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers definition, it is a facility that is temporarily converted for healthcare use during a public health emergency to reduce the burden on hospitals and establish medical facilities. Our project was in response to the surge in COVID cases in and around Chicago in the spring of 2020. The structure of this project was design-build, with Turner Construction as the prime contract holder with the Army Corps. Perkins & Will and Salas O'Brien were contracted to Turner, and you're going to hear from all of these partners here shortly. Additionally, we had several highly skilled trade contractors on the project. Key individuals were pulled from other projects to work on the Sherman ACF based on skills and ability. And what this really did was it created an atmosphere filled with competence and expertise. Both of these elements were necessary for delivering a project of this speed and complexity. This alternate care facility is located at the former Sherman Center Street campus in Elgin, Illinois. There was a hospital on the site and it was demolished in 2013. What remains today is a medical office building that has remnants of a surgical and procedural platform. The three-story structure that resides at the site was not intended for inpatient use. So when we got there, we did not find inpatient beds or support functions that would be typical of an operational hospital. It is a 250,000 square foot structure, and at the end, we utilized around 100,000 square feet for the ACF, with around 70,000 square feet undergoing heavy renovation. As a team, we quickly determined that the most efficient way to achieve maximum bed count was to demolish the medical office area to clear the way for new low-acuity COVID patient wards. The Sherman Alternate Care Facility was delivered under an extremely short timeline, as you see on the slide. In just 25 days, we went from project kickoff to substantial completion. We delivered this project one day early on April 23rd, 2020, and this represents a 4% schedule acceleration. Once a design solution was in place, there would be several iterations and adjustments that were based on this constant stream of information that was coming from the field. Some days we would issue multiple drawing sets because the project was evolving by the hour. There was a continuous cycle of information that flowed through the project team, and adjustments were made to achieve the best outcome within this available schedule and budget. The building we came into on March 30th of last year was in pretty rough shape. It had been unused for a number of years. There was a serious amount of disarray. We found areas and parts of the project that had suffered water damage. Major medical equipment had been left in place. MEP systems were left in place, and there was supply and debris scattered about. The MEP systems had not been maintained for years. There were no medical gases piped into the site. And from a medical planning perspective, there was limited existing spaces that were readily suitable for patient bays. Once our survey work of the existing structure began, there was an evaluation underway to determine what level of care would be appropriate for this alternate care facility. These facilities are intended for patients who require some degree of medical care but do not need the level of care available at an acute care hospital. The CDC outlines a 3-tier range of patient acuity levels. With Tier 1 patients, they don't need medical attention, but they do require isolation, and Tier 3 patients are the highest acuity. The Illinois Department of Public Health's level of care requirements are outlined specifically for the patient environment within an ACF, with factors such as requirements for hand washing, toilet, showers, electrical outlets, lighting, med gas, and airflow. As a project team, we did an evaluation, and it was determined that a mid-level of care tier 2A was determined as the most appropriate for this site. It does not require piped medical gases because the necessary infrastructure for piped gas did not previously exist, and the budget and the time would not support it. So where did we end up? In some locations, like a former prep recovery area, we converted the prep recovery bays into a single private COVID patient bed. The renovation of this type of area was primarily focused on addressing HVAC, electrical and plumbing related issues, repairing finishes, installing nurse call, privacy curtains, and signage. But then there were other parts of the building that underwent a heavier renovation, such as this multi-story atrium that was inside of the building. This area was used as a surgery waiting area. To convert it to a COVID patient ward, we enclosed the atrium space with new interior walls. We tore out the carpet and the other remnants of that surgery waiting function. After demo, we built open patient wards with 3-sided patient bays. Each patient bay had resilient flooring, 4 outlets, a nurse call device, its own light fixture, a privacy curtain, and a room sign. A good portion of the construction focused on the demolition and renovation of the medical office space in the southern third of the building, which we called Area C. We demolished 3 floors, as you see on the right, because that small cellular nature of a medical office space with tight corridors was not conducive to either maximizing patient beds nor getting patients transported in and out of the space. The image on the left is an example of a type of patient ward that was created at the end of this project. These wards had new finishes, new lights, a nurse call system, Wi-Fi, hand washing sinks, and better lines of sight from the nurse stations. And then finally, one mention of what allowed us to deliver this alternate care facility that required extensive demolition and construction in just 25 days. Everyone on this team had to let go of the normal constructs of a typical project delivery process. Many of our deliverables, like what you see on the screen, did not represent what a typical for-pricing construction or record drawing set looked like. We worked closely with the contractors. We discussed what information was needed and when, and in what form it really needed to be delivered in. Often, they would commence with work based on our team discussions that day, and the deliverables will follow to record what we discussed and what we agreed upon. The design team's ability to deliver this kind of non-traditional information was reliant on trusting our design build partners to adhere to best construction practices, honor those verbal agreements we made on the site, and then to deliver to the best of our abilities. And so with that brief overview of the project, we're going to move on to the panel discussion. Today, I'm joined by Mark Walsh, who's also from Perkins & Will, Deidre McDaniel from Salas O'Brien, and Tom Nelson from Turner Construction. Let's have each of you introduce yourselves and share a bit about who you are and what your role was on the project. Tom, let's start with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Nelson. I'm a project executive and healthcare director for our Chicago office. On this specific project, I was also a project executive and was the overall operational lead for the project. Ultimately, I'm responsible for delivering projects safely with high quality and maintaining a budget. And obviously, this project was no different. I've been in healthcare for about 2 decades, with that being my primary focus for Turner.
Deidre?
Hi, I'm Deidre McDaniel. My specialty is mechanical engineering, but I'm also the managing principal for the Central Region of Salas O'Brien, where I've been for over 20 years now, and working in all type of built environments across the Midwest. However, for a very brief 25 days, I had the pleasure of using that 20 years of knowledge and skill to be part of this truly integrated team. At the end of the project, the Corps commander left us all with a thought that said, we didn't complete this project in 25 days. We completed this project in 20 years of building our talent and our relationships, but we executed it in 25 days. And I think he's exactly right. I think that's exactly how we can describe what we did.
Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Walsh. I'm an architect with Perkins & Will. I am in my 20th year here at Perkins & Will, and I have a 2-part role here. I am our global director of technical design and I'm the technical director for the Chicago studio. That really has me focused primarily on project delivery, making sure that the documents and other things that we deliver as a firm are up to our quality standards. I'm also really focused on life safety and constructability and the more technical aspects of what we do. On the Sherman ACF project, I was kind of functioning as our project architect, field rep, and kind of subcontractor liaison. I was out on site every day for those 25 days, which is something that I miss, being mostly in the office now, but I did take on a slightly different role for this one, really talking with Tom and his team, Deidre and her team, and the subcontractor group.
Well, great. It's so nice to be here with all of you today, and I'm excited to just chat about our collaboration. So for our first discussion point of the day, let's talk about how this team was assembled. Since Turner was the prime contract holder that ultimately brought us all together, I'm going to ask Tom to kick this discussion off.
Well, the simple answer is very quickly, and like a common theme for the entire project. Just to put some things in a little bit of get a little bit of content behind this. The RFP was issued Friday night, and it was due Saturday night, and the team was awarded Sunday night. And we were on site. One of those pictures you showed was Monday morning. Mm-hmm. So very quickly, I think, Jenny, actually what happened was you and I called each other maybe at the same time on Friday, and we talked about let's get together and assemble a team very quickly. And it all depended on us relying on our strategic partnerships, people that we've trusted together and knew could do something of this scale and magnitude very quickly. The original budget was about $20 million, and we knew we had about 4 weeks to get it done. And as we'll talk about here, how quickly we had to do it and manage the risks together. We had to make sure we had partners that could take on that type of workload. And also, it wasn't just like, yes, Turner Construction was the prime, but it wasn't, here's all the people we're going to use. We talked, and you actually introduced me. I never had the pleasure to work with Deidre and her team, but you brought them to the table, and it was subsequent people bringing other people they trusted to the table that helped us assemble our team that quickly, because it couldn't just have been one person calling 12 strategic people in that time frame. We had to reach out together and come together very quickly for a Saturday morning, very early meeting to talk about schedule for a sight unseen project that we're submitted an RFP response in about 8 hours on. So,
yeah, we hadn't all worked together as a group, but we had each individually worked with at least one other in this group, and that became pretty important to this whole thing. As Tom mentioned, it was really about trusted partners, people we knew could deliver, people who we'd worked with before and had really good relationships with.
And I just want to say that extended all the way down to the subcontractors. We've, worked with all the subcontractors that Tom brought on board, and they all were extremely professional and great to work with, which I think was really key to not only the design team, but the construction team working all together.
Yeah, we knew early on that we were going to have to trust every discipline with their own professionalism to bring to the table, solutions, quick solutions that we could lean on them for, right? We couldn't have the traditional decision-making process of an architect designing something and the contractor looking at it and constructing it. It all had to happen at the same time. And we had to make sure that we had a outstanding performing team that could bring that professionalism at every level, and decisions could be made together to make this sort of project happen.
It's worth mentioning that it really did extend down to every level. I know we in Perkins and Will, we kind of pulled our A team. We went and pillaged people from other projects who had other things to do, but we pulled them because this was probably the most important thing we had going on, and just based on the people we all worked with, it was clear that everybody was pulling their A team, and I know there was a lot of poaching from other projects that just had to wait.
Well, how about we move on to another question here. So aside from those extreme schedule constraints and just a looming pandemic atmosphere, what part of the project delivery process differed from the most from our normal process? And we're going to go with Mark to start this one.
Thanks, Teddy. So this is kind of my focus every day, right? Project delivery, how we deliver our information to the people that construct it. And I can tell you it was different than anything I had ever worked on before. It was, personally for me, I had to set aside my preconceptions about how to do things, and to something that Tom mentioned before, it was not, we draw something, we give it to Turner looks at it with the subcontractors, and then, goes through a process like that. It was designing, building, changing, all at the same time. Documenting kind of happened later. For some things, it was not really comfortable for me. It's totally opposite of the way we usually operate. So it took a lot of getting used to. But that had to happen immediately. Like, we didn't have time to mess around and get comfortable with it. It was day 2. All right, this is the way we're doing it. I wasn't usually in the process or in the habit of individually directing subcontractors in the field, build this here, take that down. So it was a pretty different process from what we're used to.
That actually was my favorite part of the process. Because it really got right down to what did you want to deliver and how can we deliver it. And so there was a little bit of a freedom associated with being able to talk with the construction team directly, understand what their concerns were while you were contemplating a design, and then so that you can address everything in real time. And so that, as opposed to putting a design together and then finding out something kept that from working. So you immediately got feedback about, the status of existing conditions, whether they can get that done in time, whether it met the budget. And so you were able to, have that discussion immediately. So there was, from that standpoint of working with the contractor hand in hand, it was truly fun. That was the fun part.
Yeah, I would echo that we talked about a little bit the other week, just the freedom of some of the constructs you have in a normal project process. Like, if you could put aside the intensity and the speed and the stress, it was just collaboration at its best, for sure. Tom, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, what was different from the normal process? We didn't know what the scope of work was going to be until halfway through.
Small problem.
That was the direction we received that first day was get as many beds into this place as possible. But then when and then there was 2 sets of drawings rolled out in the lobby. We had about 40 people trying to figure out what this facility was. So after a stressful walkthrough to see what we actually had, and realizing that the main hospital part of the building was demoed a decade ago, and we were left with this weird space to put beds in that didn't work with any layouts. We kind of just decided that we needed to start demoing right away to figure out what we had, to figure out the scope of work, which was always get as many beds in here as possible. And we didn't probably know the 274 bed count until about 2 weeks in. That's
right.
Work we had to do. So that that was definitely something that was different from our normal processes.
Yeah. It reminds me that first day when we weren't sure what we were even doing, walked out to the site. By the end of that day, I was walking around with the demo subcontractor with a can of spray paint in hand. And those were the documents I was putting together. I was spray painting on the walls saying, this comes down, that goes away. Not normal, but, and they were pulling stuff down that same day.
But I want to be sure that everybody understands that, Perkins and Will, although it was about the beds and the schedule, when you walked through this building, and this was at the very beginning of the pandemic when no one really knew a lot about the virus or the environment of care that virus needed. But what Perkins and Will did know is what people needed was a place where they could heal. And so I think as you walked around that space, the overwhelming feeling was, how do we provide this environment for someone to get better? And so when you look at that C building, you'll see why if you were standing in it, because when you look out, it had beautiful windows that looked out onto a big green space. And so I really think that Perkins Will would step back and say, no, we have to provide something where people can heal. And that's where the whole idea of how to build a place for them, for this place was so important.
Yeah, I mean, the space, especially those first few days, was counterintuitive to everything we know about the way the environment impacts patient outcomes. And I think being early in the virus, too, that there was a tremendous amount of pressure, I think, on an emotional level, thinking about patients being isolated from their loved ones with a virus that most of us didn't know a whole lot about. And there was some really rough looking spaces in that facility, right, that at one point were on the table as we were sort of charging towards our maximum bed count. So anyway, but yes, it was, I think in the end, it looked way better than I could have imagined 4 weeks prior. And Tom did a great job picking out VCT colors and curtains. So
that's funny. The other thing I will say too is that, we're talking about COVID and the patient space, but, we also did a fantastic job of actively caring for each other. Mm-hmm. That during this process where essentially there's a pandemic going on for a disease where people should be separated. And essentially we had about 200 people that came together to try to build something, that's opposite of what we're supposed to be doing, right? But we all about the greater good and about the community piece, and everyone really dug into that and had that great mentality. But we did do a great job together, making sure we kept each other safe, so we could build this thing. And we did not have any cases on the project. Able to stay safe together, and that was pretty big too. For this delivery, because like Deidre said, this was at the very beginning when we didn't quite fully understand like we know today. We didn't 100% know what we were getting into. Right. Well, and there wasn't any like working ventilation in that building, right? So, but it was definitely, I think, I think as in the fields that we're all in, we're not usually on the front line in that way. And that's kind of what it felt like in terms of, so many of our peers were able to retreat to, their home offices, right? And that was right when we sort of were pushed out onto this site, right? To solve what was, a potential, struggle within our own community, right? From a medical facility standpoint. So, Tom, I know you pretty much lived at the site and in that trailer, but did anything keep you up at night, or did you have any worries or big risks that you want to share with the group today? Well, other than working during the pandemic and keeping everyone safe and trying to figure out the scope, I mean, those are huge things. But, the budget was something that was a concern. Like we had a huge responsibility to deliver a facility, the levels of care that we really talked about. We had a defined budget, and we had to make sure that we stayed within that. I mean, that was a big responsibility for the collective team. And, typically you have an architect that, don't get me wrong, there's lots of times as budgets are given based on very early drawings or concepts, but there was no concept. That's the thing. It was get beds in this place, but how does beds fit in here? So we had to, as a team, understand what risks we were taking, how we were spending the money early on while I was still trying to figure out what the scope was going to be, and be responsible in those decision-making processes. It was almost like we spent a lot of time figuring out what not to do before we knew what to do. It may sound kind of silly, but we were spending money what not to do. Dietrich, remember, we were going down a path within the first week of 14 new rooftop units at this thing, because we had no idea about the conditions of the existing units and the environmental safety behind them and the mold behind them. So it was like, forget it, just let's get brand new units. But then we, stopped that because we were worried about schedule and costs. And it was a good thing we did, because that would have put us over budget. And that was a good decision we made as a team. But the budget was something definitely that, amongst everything else, we just had to be responsible with. And that was something that early on I thought about a lot.
But just that one example, Tom, that you talked about, where the decision was made early on. We don't understand anything about the ventilation system. Ventilation is super important, as the CDC had described there. So we're going with new units. They're going to sit outside. We're going to spaghetti into the building. And then it just kept avalanching into this bigger, how are we going to support it? How are we getting power there? It just started avalanching into this, what seemed like a pretty straightforward process, to where at some point in time, so what keeps you up at night, you can't sleep because it feels wrong. And the fact that the team could pivot, not just me, but Turner with the schedule and the budget, and Perkins and Will with what the design is going to be, and the subcontractors who, they like to march. You give them direction, they want to march. They do not want to pivot. And so when I crawled back into that old air handling unit, it was a big custom-made air handling unit with big axial flow fans. And you really dug around in there. You were like, well, this unit really isn't that bad. It's kind of good. And sure enough, when I drug everybody in there with me, and we all went, right, Tom? We all marched up there, like 15 of us. We all agreed that that was the right way to go, and we changed. And I thought that was really a shining moment, because you had everybody who nobody wanted to change. A decision was made. We were marching forward, and to make a change felt like we're going backwards. But in reality, we were going forward, and it really made a huge difference, not just to the, to the cost or the budget, but to the way the building looked to the community, because all those that equipment sitting outside, going into the building like spider, the community would see that differently than they do when they see a building from the outside looking like a building. So I think that was a real a change moment for the whole team. I thought that was great.
There was a whole series of the pivoting was so important, but the budget is an issue. We kind of, at least in my own head, and I get a sense of this, at the very, very start, we were all really fixated on the schedule because it seemed so impossible, so outlandish to say, okay, you're going to turn this mess into an operating building in 4 weeks, but you can, that can easily become this huge sinkhole of money. 12, 14 air handlers suddenly with power and ductwork and all this stuff might serve the schedule part better, but it doesn't serve the whole thing better. So we ended up having to kind of pivot back and forth between schedule priority, budget priority, function priority, over the course of every day, and make these really quick decisions about which was the most important one for this issue.
Right. We actually another thing we looked at, we could have gotten more beds in the facility easily, but we made the conscious decision, with those ORs that were from the 70s or whatever, that had zero natural light in them and would have been an awful place for someone with COVID to be sitting in and recovering, and deciding, because that would have been money spent to bring them ventilation in there and flooring and cleaning them up, and working with the Army Corps and deciding, you know what, we're going to cut out these and not add these in because it's not the right for the patient experience. And also that's somewhere else where we could strategically place money in, like, we did get a new rooftop unit. We did get one new rooftop unit, one new chiller, right? That we did afford into the project. And then being able to make those type of decisions real time, last responsible moment, stay on budget and get the maximum number of beds was attributed to the entire team, and the ability of literally 200 people being able to pivot, which is what it was. When you count everyone working on that project and how fast we were moving, yes, when we decided not to go that rooftop unit route, that affected the entire project, not just the mechanical folks, everyone. 200 people had to pivot, which shows just the collective, how the team collectively embraced how we're trying to finish this job, all moving forward together.
It happened on big and small scales multiple times. There was a similar thing with the radiology suite where that was actually under construction. And we got to a point a few days in where, some of the subs started coming back and saying, I don't think you realize how much stuff is in here, and there's radiology equipment, and there's, we're going to be spending huge amounts of time and money to get a dozen beds back in this area. So, it was one of these things where probably after the last moment, we decided, all right, we're done. We're done with this area. Wall it off, find some places for beds elsewhere. And again, it was the whole team having to pivot to that and, figure out where beds go, how to serve them with power, all that stuff. It was, a constant churn of those decisions.
So just to keep us moving here, we talked about, what were some of these unique project challenges that were specific to healthcare that maybe wouldn't have existed with other project types. I know for myself, this project required some serious compartmentalization. When we do traditional healthcare projects, we have lots of guidelines and codes and rules and best practices. And all those things help us shape the right solution for a project. And we also have many regulatory checkpoints along the way, right? And so in some ways there's a comfort in that. And some of that structure did not exist on this project because of the nature of the project. We did have some framework that was laid out by the CDC and the state of Illinois Department of Public Health, but there was still a lot left up to interpretation from within this group. And I know that we all definitely leaned heavily into our depth of experience because it was really about finding and delivering a solution to maximize those beds at warp speed. And, we couldn't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? When you have 4 weeks to deliver on this. And so I know another healthcare aspect that came up somewhat late, I guess, in the 4 weeks was the request, Deidre, for negative pressure in the wards, right? When that didn't exist to begin with. I don't know if you want to talk about that just a little bit.
Well, again, that had a lot to do with the just the unknown of the virus, but it also was impacted when we talked about pivoting from the rooftop units. The use of the base building infrastructure allowed us to. We couldn't make a room by room negative, but what we could do is make the ward negative to the rest of the space, which we really thought was important for the protection of the healthcare personnel. So that, there were places where you could go where you weren't concerned that the virus was within your space. And so, although we made those judgments as a team, because that information, that that detailed of a discussion about the negative pressure of a healthcare space was not identified by anyone else, so we had to interpret that. And I think, Jenny, you had an issue with the flows. Didn't you reimagine the whole flow of how the people would come into the space and how they would leave once they were healthy?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was definitely, this was for lower acuity COVID patients, but the idea that you had patients arriving to the site that were positive and contagious, and then you had patients who would be potentially departing and no longer contagious. And at the time, we didn't really understand, whether the two could pass back and forth, right? The virus, in terms of if you're negative now, or if you've had it, can you, there was just so much unknown at the time. So trying to take, and then the other flow, was, what if a lower acuity patient, escalated to a higher acuity, and how would those patients leave this building? So I think the challenge there was that this facility was not a hospital. And so, it was a medical office space. And so we didn't necessarily have, all the elevator and vertical transportation infrastructure that we would have in place, and the types of sort of separation of flows that would have enabled, an ideal separation of flows. So I think we came up with some creative solutions. Again, was it perfect? Probably not, but it was the best solution for this building and this time frame. And so any other thoughts about sort of unique challenges specific to healthcare, Mark or Tom?
I just wanted to compliment the design team about, when we first were, set to get as many beds as possible in this facility. The fact that you guys were able to come up with a very, very good program layout for those flows is, I don't know if people realize that it wasn't clean it up and cubby holes and put beds in. I mean, it was actual design layout for people coming in, people leaving, keeping people safe, separate from each other from the virus, at their appropriate, whatever was going on with them. And being able to essentially take the space that was just not conducive for this at all, and seeing that and being able to design to that and construct it all at the same time, that was humongous, because I don't realize when we started that was going to be another enhanced item that we were doing here, because some of the other projects already had the bed set up appropriately because they were hospitals. So the fact that the design team was able to come up with flows that kept people safe and we were able to construct it, I think was a huge part of the success of the project.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Fortunately, nobody used the facility, right?
Right.
But if it was used, people would have been safe using it.
Yeah.
Huge for the project.
Agreed. It was extreme creativity and problem solving, but it was a lot of fun in the end.
The best decision we made was day one, saying let's knock out everything we can. That was the best decision.
Agree.
Just knock on as many walls as possible, and we'll figure it out. That was the decision.
Yeah. So, Deidre, what do you think was the most important factor in this team being successful under these extreme circumstances?
Yeah, as we talk about that, it's funny because I kind of was thinking about what I thought that was, and we've talked about a lot of them. We've talked about trusting everybody on the team, which I think was huge. And, Tom, we were talking about before this of what people were worried about. And Tom's like, I was worried about the budget. And I was like, I never even thought about the budget, because you know why? Because I knew Tom had the budget, right? And so everybody's ability to trust that they were doing their job, and so it freed you up to do yours. I wasn't double thinking what Tom was doing or what Jenny was doing. I was just trying to support them in that effort. And I think that was so important that, you had these real professional people doing their profession at the highest level. So I think that was huge. But, we also talked about that defined mission, which was so meaningful to everybody. Everybody was there because they wanted to help. why are people with 20 years experience sitting on a job site? When's the last time you sat on a job site for 28 days? It's been a long time, but and it was fun, right? You put your boots on and your hard hat. It was kind of a different way. Tom gave me a special key to the women's outhouse, so that was nice. All those things you miss when you work in the office. But so that was trust, defined mission, the ability to pivot, the flexibility. As people get kind of entrenched in their own world, it seems like you lose some flexibility. So that I think that certainly loosened us all back up, got us, found those flexible parts of our brain to think outside the box. I think that was really, really fun, and we keep talking about being fun, and it had a certain level of anxiety to it, but the difference between anxiety and excitement, I think, are really close. So sometimes it was one and sometimes it was the other. Something we haven't talked about at all is what Tom set up for the team to communicate. And I don't know how many times I heard him say, we are going to over communicate. And so he might want to talk about that, but we had a kickoff meeting in the morning. We had a roundup meeting in the afternoon. And then on my drive home, because Elgin is about an hour outside the city proper, I would sit with my contractors in their internal meetings, and they allowed me, the design engineer, to sit with them on their meetings. So I would meet with the mechanical contractor, the electrical contractor, the plumbing contractor, the fire contractor, every single day on the way home. And I think that was really important because they had their team, their foreman, their superintendents, and Tom's meeting also. But, making sure that every detail went all the way down to the hands that it needed to get to was really important. And making sure they understood the way we wanted it done, because people hear things differently. So that communication all the way down was really helpful. And, those contractors let us in the meeting. And not only did they let us in the meeting, they engaged with us. And I think that was really, really positive. And then the last thing is, it kind of relates to pivoting, but just the flexibility and working with new information. It wasn't like we pulled our drawing out and did our drawing. Every day was new information, and every day those drawings, changed. So those are really the things I think. And when you think about it, those things are really important in every project we do, right? Trusting each other, flexibility, having a mission of what you want to do, even if it doesn't have these high standards like, helping your community in a global pandemic. There still are, good missions that our work does that I think we should remind ourselves about the importance of. So that would be. But Tom, you should talk a little bit about the communication you set up, because I thought that was really excellent for our 25.
Well, you hit it on the head. It was over communication, but that's what we had to do because, like Mark mentioned before, there was no documents. So we had to huddle in the morning, we had to huddle in the afternoon, we had to get buy-off from the Army Corps about what we were proposing to do. And everyone literally had to have their marching orders for the next 4 hours because that's how key it was. And yes, I remember at one point, I don't even remember staying at my desk because of all the people that kept coming up and looking for direction and what to do next. And that was just the nature of it. And it was, I don't want to say it was great because it was exciting and we were passionate about it, working together. Again, pandemic going on, stressful, put that aside. We really did have, I think, a good time together solving this problem. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but it was a huge problem and we all are problem solvers. And I think we all love being part of solving that problem together.
For sure.
The one thing I want to make sure we don't forget is there was a real sense of appreciation, like up and down the line, like across all these lines. People were very appreciative. There was this moment a few days in where the neighbors brought us cookies and brownies and muffins and, little signs that said, thank you for what you're doing, which was, really touching. And it was intense. It was, we were all working 100-hour weeks for a month. It was really difficult to sustain, but there was a real and heartfelt kind of thank you for doing this, both from the community and, I'd talk to the drywall subcontractor who would say, thanks for getting me that so fast. And it was not just like a perfunctory thank you. It was a really real thing. And it was all reciprocal. You can't overestimate how important that was in this kind of situation.
Agreed. Well, I think we're heading towards the end of our time. And do we want to share some closing thoughts? Mark, I don't know if you want to take a pass at it.
So I guess the thing that I'll say to kind of sum up my kind of experience and what I observed, this is the most intense project I've ever worked on for a sustained period of time. And it was extremely stressful, but in the end, it was so satisfying. And it was like, I would work with this group of people again in a heartbeat. And you walk away with that. And that's what I'll remember once the memory of working from 6 a.m. till 11 at night every day fades away.
I think we missed it, right? We missed the rush of and the intensity afterwards. It was like having to come off of this 4-week sprint, and then it was like, what do I do now?
there was a little withdrawal. I mean, seriously, among the team, we heard it. Mm-hmm. You do have to spend a week or so coming down.
Right.
This is so full on.
Deidre or Tom?
I agree with everything Mark just said. It just, again, doing about $18 million worth of work in 4 weeks, planning to punch list, just really showed me that, when good people come together in this industry, what they are able to accomplish together, when they all have the same goal and mission. That was the biggest thing. Again, very stressful project. Completely agree with Mark. A lot of anxiety, long hours, tiredness. But what kept us going was trying to solve that problem and completing that mission. And we had everybody moving in the same direction. Great group of people. And that's what made it so satisfying when we completed it on time. And thank God that the facility did not need to be used. But it was there, and it would have been an appropriate facility for people to recover from in case it needed to be. And that's something I think we all should be proud of.
Sure. Deidre, do you want to make any closing thoughts?
I just want to say that working for the government, you hear a lot of horror stories, but the Corps of Engineers, they were a good client. They kept us focused. They let us do our thing, and they were good to work with. So we should just give them a little shout out.
For sure. I mean, I think, I think we didn't really talk about that, but they truly empowered every team, member on the project to deliver to the best of their abilities. And there was not, a lot of second or triple guessing, there was a lot of collective collaboration, but then it was like, okay, what do you guys want to do? And I think that was part of what made the experience so fun, was just knowing that we had their trust to deliver to the best of our abilities. And fortunately, we were all surrounded by some top-notch professionals, right? So it was just a wonderful experience. So I think with that, we want to just thank everyone for joining us today. And I know we're gonna make our way to the networking hall on floor 2 for a live question and answer session. So feel free to join us there, and we hope to chat some more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.